Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, a podcast with me, Mark Decano, in which I try to befuddle the Oxford English Dictionary with alternative definitions of the word comedy by asking those in the know what comedy means to them, and maybe come up with a more up-to-date definition of the word comedy. But probably not. I love talking to people in comedy about comedy. If you'd like to hear what they have to say as much as I do, then please like, subscribe, rate, review and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode is a journalist, podcaster, promoter and comedian, and founder of Indie Amnesty. She's been tour support for Jack Whitehall and Frankie Boyle, who described her as one of the most exciting new acts on the circuit. It's stand-up comedian Alexandra Haddow.
Hi, Mark.
Hiya.
Oh, hang on.
If you're ready and you're happy.
Ready.
Let's ask you first and foremost, was comedy a big thing in the family when you were young?
Yeah, massive thing. My dad was a massive Billy Connolly fan. My dad's Scottish.
Yeah.
And we always used to watch, all his videos. I'm showing my age now. All his videos, always watching sort of comedy panel shows. And then we stumbled across Bill Bailey Part Troll one night and Dylan Moran Monster. And it was, just like massive fans, always quoting sitcoms, always doing that. Yeah. Like, I remember being broken up with by my first boyfriend when I was 15, and I went in and I was, crying and stuff in the living room. And I said to my dad, "Can we watch some Billy Connolly?" So I think that was an early coping mechanism.
Yeah, breakup cure. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So were these the sort of people, Bill Bailey, Billy Connolly, were they inspirations and influences on you when you decided you wanted to be a comedian?
Do you know what's weird? I didn't really start calling myself a comedian, honestly, until last year. And I don't mean, I used to say I do comedy, you know what I mean? Mm. And then it's only when you realise, oh, this is actually my main source of income now, that you kind of finally say, oh, I'm a comedian. Whereas some people, they seem to do like one gig and they've got like an Instagram that's like Alex Haddow comedy and stuff like that. It's like, just hedge your bets. Like, this is a long run. So yeah, but there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. Like, do what you want, do your own, follow your own path. Yeah, they weirdly, I'd say, like, they're influences, but not directly, because the style of comedy that I love, the kind of slightly off the wall, like Dylan Moran, David O'Doherty, silliness. I don't really. I wish I could be that type of comedian, but I don't. And I am more like in conversation, but on stage, it's not really who I am. I'm just quite myself on stage. Yeah. Which is, maybe something I should work on. But no, yeah, it's more like I'm in awe of them, but I don't really take it on as an influence, weirdly.
Right.
Yeah.
You said there about being yourself on stage, but obviously also that it's not the person that you are when you're off stage. So how much of it is yourself and how much is it like an extension of yourself or a character that you play?
I am quite much, because I MC a lot as well. I am. Yes. That's pretty much me. I mean, it's heightened, obviously, and it's slightly exaggerated, but it is how I would talk, really. And one of the sort of things that I need to, that I'm trying to do is MC less and do more sets, because I don't want to be pigeonholed as one or the other. But I love emceeing and stuff, but I'm trying to work on, because I'm working up to a show, I'm trying to work on more sets. But I mean, I am almost, there's a bit in my new show, it's a bit of a challenge, because I'm like a low status comedian. I'm like quite self-deprecating, stuff like that. But there's certain elements of the new show, without trying to give anything away, that like the subject matter that I'm talking about, I almost sort of do like a faux smugness, which isn't really me, but hopefully it sort of comes off within the context of the show. Right. That sounds like really cryptic, but yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about your show. I mean, you said about you didn't really see yourself as a comedian. So, I mean, I know that you have many other strings to your bow, but you've been a comedian for a while now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a strange one, because I didn't really get into it thinking this was ever going to be my job, right? All my life. I just thought this will be a nice sort of side project. I've always loved comedy. I got tricked into doing it first time. And it wasn't like a big plan really.
Yeah.
I just sort of kept working at it, and and then one day you're like, oh shit, it's my job.
So tell me about that first time that you were tricked into. What was your first gig? When was it? How did it go?
It was, my first gig was actually like 8.5, 9 years ago. I did it at Comedy Virgins, which a lot of people do as their first ever gig.
Yeah.
I'd done bits and bobs before at my friend used to run a great night called Romantic Misadventures. And it was great because it was a nice stepping stone. I think he should bring it back. Seriously, it was amazing. It was a nice stepping stone to comedy. It was like people that could do storytelling. It was like, you could tell anything to do with that theme. So some people had really conceptual, weird, things in like pie charts and flow charts, and it was almost like audience participation.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was just someone getting up and reading off a piece of paper saying, a bad date that they'd had. But it was always a really great audience, really nice atmosphere. It was like on a Monday night at a pub in Camden, the Black Heart or something, the Black Penny or something. And it was great. And I did a few of those, and it was a nice thing to sort of get up on stage and read off a bit of paper, because you're getting used to being on stage. And that was a lot of fun. And then my friend James doesn't do as much live stuff now, but was a stand-up, and said, we were just sort of writing bits and bobs and stupid things together. And he was like, oh, you should definitely give stand-up a go. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm so in awe of anybody that does that. I'm a huge fan of stand-up and blah, 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 blah. But, I'm never going to do it. And he was like, oh, you should write me 5 minutes of what you would say if you were going to do it. And I said, okay, yeah, fine. That's quite a good exercise sort of thing. So I did that, and then he read it, and he was like, oh, this is really good. Thank God, because I booked you in to do 5-minute spot at the Comedy Virgins. So, but weirdly, I think this happens. I've spoken to quite a lot of comedians who have done this. I did one, and it went quite well, and then I didn't do another one for like a year and a half. Yeah, it's because I did want to do it again the next week, but he wasn't available to be my bringer, because when you're starting off, you have to have a bringer.
Yeah,
and he wasn't available, and I didn't have the balls to basically tell anyone else that I'd done it, or I didn't want anyone else to see me do it. And so I was at the pub. I was at, like, my comedy career could have been 2 years further on by now, I think, if he'd have been available that day. But yeah, I was in the pub sort of and waiting for him, and they're quite strict there. And I just didn't have a bringer, and I didn't have the balls to kind of tell anyone else. So I didn't do it for like another year and a half. I just thought, oh, I'll tick that off. That's nice.
Yeah. And
then I went away for like 3 or 4 months by myself, and did some traveling, did the sort of classic knobhead midlife crisis at 28. And then sort of came and realized that how bored I was with my job and stuff like that. And I just thought, I tell you what, I'll give stand-up another go. And I remember writing in my diary, try and do 3 gigs a month, which is now laughable. I think I've hit that target. Sometimes in a month. Yeah.
I was speaking to another comedian. I can't remember who it was, but it was on a previous episode, and they said, "Oh, yes." They went away and they came back and met up with another comedian they'd been on a course with, and said, "Oh, have you been busy?" "Yeah, I've done about 7 or 8 gigs this year."
What? Yeah.
They've done like 150 gigs. It's like, oh, I thought I was doing well.
Great.
So what you didn't mention there doing the first show is anything about like the anxiety or the nerves. What was it like setting foot on a stage for the first time?
Absolutely terrifying. I've got my only proper phobia, I would say, is vomiting, is being sick. And I said to my friend James, I was like, what if I vomit? What if I vomit from nerves? Truly expecting him to just go, oh, don't be silly, that's ridiculous. And he just looked at me and he went, I've seen it happen. I was like, James, I do not need this now. Like, lie to me, for God's sake. I was absolutely terrified until even now, if I'm nervous about a gig, as soon as I step on the stage and get a laugh, the nerves go. Yeah. And luckily I did get a laugh at that time, so it was fine.
Yeah. Are you mindful of your style when you're on stage? Do you see yourself as like a storyteller?
No, I properly don't think about that at all. Yeah. Really. I know that I'm not a one-liner person or whatever, and I I would describe myself as like storytelling or observational, but I don't really think about the stuff. Probably should. I don't. I wish that I had more of a shtick sometimes or a niche or whatever, but it's just not me.
Right.
So I just sort of anything that I mean, it has to be rooted in some reality for me to get the idea going. So sometimes you'll exaggerate or you'll hear a story from your friend and think that's interesting, and then sort of doctor it a little bit. But it's all, I mean, it's pretty much all true, and it usually is me as well. But the odd thing that's happened to my friend or whatever, I've been like, that's amazing or that's interesting or whatever.
Yeah.
And then sort of change it a little bit. But yeah, it has to sort of be rooted in truth. I've got really, really great like admiration for people that sort of have these amazing scenarios, and afterwards you're like, God, that's mental, and they'll be like, oh yeah, it didn't really happen like that or whatever, or it just sometimes I do think it's rare, but I think sometimes people it is complete conjecture, and you're like, wow, that's incredible that you just sort of thought of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm in awe of those people. Yeah.
You talked about being an MC.
Yeah.
I've seen you MCing many times, and I will tell you what I told Jamie, who you know.
Yeah.
I've seen an awful lot of MCs and an awful lot of awful MCs, but you are very, very good at it. You're one of my favourites, I think.
Thank you.
And I said that to Jamie as well, and that's true. I can have more than one favourite.
Yeah, I was going to say Jamie is amazing. Jamie Allerton, yeah.
I would always rate people like Rich Wilson's one of my favourites to MC. So very relaxed. Callie Beaton is brilliant at it.
Yes.
Yourself, Jamie. We'll talk about your solo stuff in a second, but how do you feel about MCing as opposed to, I mean, I know that you said about maybe not being like typecast as an MC.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the MCing? Do you enjoy it as much as a solo or a spot?
Yeah, I do. I really like it. I am way more relaxed as an MC than I am doing a set, because I don't have to prep anything.
Right.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, if you're MCing a tough gig, I think you've got a tougher job than the acts.
Right.
But if you're MCing a great gig or you've made it great, then I think you've got the best job.
Yeah.
Because you can make it look like everything is off the cuff.
Yeah.
If you want to. But, and a lot of it isn't. And a lot of it, I get like a spark of an idea from MCing. Somebody will say something and I'll sort of come back with something and think, oh, something in that.
Yeah.
But no, I absolutely love it, especially at the Bill Murray, which is one of my favourite venues to MC.
Yeah.
I absolutely love MCing there, because I usually sort of the first half is all crowd work, and then the second half, I do a set at the top, really. Because it just lets them know that, they can't get involved in the whole show. Like, you have to, I'm going to warm you up at the start, and then I'm going to sort of say, now listen.
Yeah.
But no, I absolutely love it, and I think there's sometimes a bit of snobbery with people that only MC, but I think it's a completely different skill, and it definitely makes me more relaxed as a comedian when I'm doing a set. Definitely. Right. I think you can sometimes tell, not always, you can sometimes tell when people have never MC'd, because they freak out if they get a heckle or a talk back or whatever, or even if someone just sort of says something to them, it's often it's not really a heckle. It's usually like somebody replying to something, or somebody agreeing, somebody disagreeing even. And some comedians, if they never MC, you can sort of see them being like, I'm going to have to go off script here, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is, as an MC, you're not really bothered about, because you know all the tricks. Even if they're being an arsehole, you can kind of deal with them.
How do you handle hecklers in the sense that, do you have sort of prepared comebacks in the back of your mind, always cocked and ready, or do you like sort of weighing into the improv of establishing whether you're going to roll with what they have to say or shut them down? Yeah,
no, I don't have set. I mean, you've got a few things in your arsenal, I think.
Yeah.
That but not consciously, if you know what I mean. There's a few attitudes to take, like, because often, I mean, 9.5 times out of 10, the audience are on your side. So you've got to remember that. And I think that's what makes people nervous when they first start MCing, like in case somebody says something, it's like the audience don't want to see you lose. Like, the audience want to see the prick that's ruining their night lose or whatever.
Yeah.
But often, there's really subtle ways of just making them feel small. Or even like, if you turn it flirty, especially if it's a guy, like, they don't know what to do. So you just, you're going to be like, is there an energy here? And then they sort of, they don't know. If they say no, be like, all right, it's getting hot, or like anything like that. You can sort of rip off. And yeah, I don't really have like set comebacks, but some like my sort of one that I don't really want to get to, but if you can always just sort of be quite patronizing, be like, come on now, shush, shush, shush. Do you know what I mean? But that's sort of your last resort, but it does make them feel small.
Yeah.
But no, not set comes back. I don't mind if people are getting involved in the show a bit. I don't mind that at all. It's when people want the show to be about them, and there's that you as an MC, like, you know, the exact line where somebody's, you know, it's great if you're emceeing a gig that's maybe a bit quieter, then somebody kind of does get involved because you're like, great, I can riff off this.
Yeah.
But if it's sort of like, I was doing a gig in Colchester last week, and like this couple were just desperate to be involved on the front, and you're just a bit like, I'm gonna have to just shut you down because like it's not about you, and other people are starting to get pissed off with you. And it was such a big gig as well that it's more difficult as well being a crowd, an MC in a big crowd, because you have to kind of keep repeating back what somebody says because they can't hear it, and then it can become a bit disjointed and stuff like that. So I do like it though. We've got a lot more plates spinning.
Yeah. Well, there's something that you kind of alluded there to in talking about being a bit flirty. I mean, as a woman in comedy, do you feel like people are more ready to interrupt or participate, shall we say?
Yeah, I do actually think that. And I'm not one for, I've never, like, you know, I've always been very lucky in my comedy career. I've never really had I've had a couple of instances where I've been like, oh, that, you know, that was because I was a woman. But really, like, very, very, very minimal. But I do think, especially when you go outside of cities, where people maybe don't watch as much comedy, or maybe they're not as used to seeing female comedians, and I don't have a sort of deep, you know, commanding voice sort of thing. I can control a room, but I have to do it a different way. And I do think that sometimes at those big gigs, maybe in the middle of nowhere and stuff like that, you do feel a bit like, as soon as a man comes on, they sort of shut up. Right. Can happen, not always. But you do sort of feel like, is that me, or is that because I'm not, you know, as much of a physical sort of presence on stage as a guy? Right. But yeah, sometimes I do feel like that. But you know, generally you've just got to deal with that. So play the game with the marbles you've got. Yeah.
But see, that's interesting because I feel that generally speaking, comedy audiences are more open now. The comedy scene is more diverse and more aware and more forward. But I've heard, frankly, quite frightening stories or seen for myself, women on stage getting heckled in some quite shocking ways. And it's just, I mean, has that been your experience? Is things getting better or is things getting worse? I don't know.
I've been quite lucky. I've never really had anything... I tell you, yes. In fact, I'll give you one example, and it was, I think, the worst heckle I've ever had because it made me angry, which is the sort of worst thing you can be on stage, because when you're angry, you lose your wit. Right. You know, that's why in an argument you're always looking back and thinking, "Fucking hell, I should have said that." Yeah. You know, because you're angry and the red mist goes up, and you can't be as, if you're calm. Yeah. And you're in control, then you can deal with anything. Yeah. And I really haven't had anything. I've had like one sort of sexist heckle once. That was a gig years ago in Aldershot. I say a gig, it was like a room at a pub. Me and Jamie Alton did it. It's gone down in our sort of comedy career, really. It was absolutely mental. I'll always remember it. You always remember like the best and the worst gigs, don't you? But no, it was last January 2022. First gig of the year in Birmingham Glee. Mm-hmm. And with the Glees, sometimes, I don't know, because maybe people, they've been at work that day and then they come out on the Friday, but the Saturdays are always feels way more relaxed. People seem way more up for it. I don't know what it is. It's always been my experience. Friday night crowds are good. They're just not as loose. They're just not as up for it, that kind of thing. Right. And I went on the Friday and I was emceeing, and they have this big, sort of massive build up at the Glees. Like the music goes on for genuinely 4 minutes, and it's really kind of like, it sounds like the start of a Marvel film. It's huge. You know, like really, really building you up, sort of thing. And yet then usually they go, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Glee on a Friday night. Please put your hands together for your host and MC, Miss Alexandra Haddow," whatever. And then, you know, the crowd start clapping and you come out, whatever. Yeah. But they had a temp guy in this day. So they had a 4-minute build up, and it was like lights going everywhere, you know, like this. And then the music ended and he just went, "Please welcome Alexandra Haddow." Like, so it was a weird kind of crescendo. And then, you know, this plunge of energy where I just sort of then walked out and people were sort of clapping. So I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to like really amp this up with my sort of intro. So I came on and I was like, ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday night. We're at the Glee Birmingham. Wow. Yeah. And it was like, yeah, the cheer was already like a bit lackluster. So I was like, I'm going to have to work hard. I said, we got 3 amazing comedians. We got 2 breaks for you tonight. And then somebody shouted something already that quick.
Wow. Yeah.
And I went, what was that, mate? And he went, slow down. And I was like, you fucking prick. Like, and it got me so angry. And I should have just said, is that what your wife says? Like, hack, whatever. And I just went, but I was so pissed off because I was like, you wouldn't have shouted at a guy. And I was only doing it because this guy had sort of like said my name with all the energy of a slug. And he just put me off for the whole first bit. And him and his mate, basically, and then I was emceeing, I was getting nothing. It was literally, like couples that had met in an admin job for 5 years. They couldn't remember who asked who out. Like there was nothing, there was absolutely nothing. I was getting nothing. I was going into material, I was getting nothing. And I could hear, the thing was I could hear them, like him and his group of mates, like middle-aged guys, just being like, oh, not this again. Like, as in, because I was asking somebody else a question, because I was trying to get a hook for the audience to like bring them all together. And then like, there's usually a story, all that sort of thing. And it just absolutely threw me for the first, and I just was so pissed off. And those guys kind of ruined, like the first guy went up, and he's kind of struggled, and they were a bit of a weird crowd. And what it was is these guys were like putting everybody on edge,
right?
Because they were kind of like slagging off whatever was happening, which obviously makes people tense around them. And then the second section I went on, and it was a bit better, but they were still there. They weren't chatting this time. And usually the Glees are really good. Like they usually chuck people out if they're being like that. And then Carl Donnelly went on and just kind of addressed it and was like, what do you people want, kind of thing. And he sort of turned it around. And like halfway through his set, these people left, I think of their own accord. And the whole gig changed. Like the whole gig, like everybody relaxed. Everybody started having a good time. The third section I came on did well. In fact, the headliner did well. Yeah. It was just like this horrible patronizing comment at the start that just really annoyed me so much because I did think that was something that you wouldn't have shouted at like Mick Ferry or or Carl Donnelly even, or Rich Wilson, even if they'd have come out really fast saying ladies and gentlemen blah blah blah, like you wouldn't have done it.
No, you're right.
So that was probably the most, what I felt was something that wouldn't have been shouted if I was the guy. But no, I've never had anything that bad really at all. I've been quite lucky.
Are you now managing to get together with mixed bills where there are other women on the bill?
Oh yeah, loads. I think London's a bit of a bubble in the fact that you're probably not experiencing the same issues as, say, like a club comic that lives between Manchester and Leeds and does a lot of, club gigs up north in more random places. I think that, a woman up there would probably say, yeah, sometimes it is still difficult. Like I very rarely. I find myself being the only woman on bills, but usually that's because there's only 3 or 4 people on the bill.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? If there's anything more than 4, I think it's usually me and another woman. But yeah, when I do Glee a lot, it's sort of like it's me and 3 guys. But it's still, I think, even if there was 5 people, I think there would usually be another woman.
Yeah. So. If you're at a mixed bill, if you're an act rather than an MC, if you're an MC, you got to be there all the time. If you're an act, do you turn up, do your spot and go, or do you try and stick around and see the other comedians? Do you watch comedy?
Yeah, well, I don't always stick around if I'm at a mixed bill. It depends if I'm doubling or if I've got something to do, or sometimes you're like, oh, this is a nice opportunity for me to have a night where I'm in before 10 or something, something like that. But I always stick around if there's someone I want to see on the bill. And that sounds awful. Like, it's obviously I want to see everybody, but let's say it's someone that I gig with all the time.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're on after me. Do you know what I mean? I'll be like, oh, I'm going to head off or whatever. But I go and watch shows quite a lot, especially now that I'm writing my show. I've gone to see a few more hours when I can. Yeah. Especially at sort of Soho Theatre and like my friends' previews, stuff like that. See what other people are doing. Yeah. And it's quite inspiring actually. I always get a few ideas when I watch somebody else's hour, because you're like, oh, I see what they've done there with that structure, or like they've done this, or that's that, they've told us that about themselves, that's why the end bit, you feel this about them or whatever. But yeah, I still watch a lot of comedy, I would say. I've got absolutely zero idea about the American scene. All my mates are lads, and they all know all these American comics that I'm like, I have never fucking heard of these people in my life. And yeah, I'm really bad at watching American comedy, but I do watch a lot of like British and Irish comedy. Yeah.
Do you exclusively see it through the eyes of a comedian, or are you able to detach and just enjoy it at face value?
I can detach, thank God, because I feel like some people really can't.
Yeah.
I think it's like the comedian brain comes in. Do you know what? The comedian brain comes in when you see it being done badly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even sometimes with a professional show, a massive name or something, if everybody has one where you think, oh, that wasn't great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And or they've rushed that out or whatever it was. But I think when it's being done really well, no, not at all. Yeah. Like sometimes afterwards I'll sort of be like, oh yeah, that was great. In a comedy brain way. But when I'm watching it, no, not really.
Yeah. I like what you said there about when it goes wrong. I remember Cambridge Comedy Festival in 21.
Yeah.
I was sat on the side of the hill. It was in the field at that time. These things were still outdoors.
Yeah.
And there was a big name television comic on the main stage.
Yeah.
And I was sat on the hill with some other comedians, and we were watching. And they came out and they opened with a joke that they obviously had in their mind later in the set. And when it came to it, they did the same joke again.
Really?
Within like 3-4 minutes. So we were all absolutely doubled over laughing because it was so funny.
That's my like biggest fear that I do that one. But when you do like at the Bill Murray on a Saturday, they've got 4 shows. And sometimes you're doing 3, sometimes you're emceeing 2 and doing a spot on 1. And sometimes by the last show, you're like, I don't know what I've said in this show and what I've said in the other ones.
I know some comics who will do different hour, and they'll do 3 shows, and they'll do 3 different shows on the same day. And then I was like, how do you remember which bit is?
Yeah,
do you
exactly.
not slide into another show accidentally?
I try and do that. I usually have some overlap, but I just usually try and, as a little test for myself, like not do exactly the same.
Yeah.
But it will usually be, because of that, it will usually be like 70% the same, and then change a few jokes or try that extra bit or that different bit or that new bit or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm worried if I did like a totally different set that I would automatically go into a bit and then I'd be like, oh shit, I've done that. Do you know what I mean? It'd be, but yeah.
Yeah. I love that, because there's one thing that I noticed when talking to comedians or being at gigs where everyone seems to be analytical, and I do it myself. I see a lot of comedy, so every now and then I go, yeah, I know where that's going. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say you must do as well. Yeah.
But one of the things I really love is when I see comedians enjoying other comedy, and just how I remember one time at the Banshee Labyrinth, a Lloyd Langford gig. This must be years ago now. And Stuart Lee sneaked in the back of the room, and I saw him laughing at the set, and I thought, well, that's brilliant, because he's seen and written and done so much comedy to still be able to laugh. And I remember one night at Fulham Comedy Club, you and your friends doubled over in a row watching the show. I can't remember who was on. I will have it written down.
Who was on? Yeah.
I think Katie Green was on the bill. You were there. I'm sure Hubert would have been there.
Yeah, it probably would have been. Yeah, it probably would have been Jamie emceeing, I think.
Yeah, and but you were all doubled over.
Oh yeah.
But it's great to be able to. So you are still able to do that, to go out and be entertained even
definitely.
though you are trying to shut down the analytical part of your brain.
Yeah, I do, and I think I would try and. I think you've got to work on that if you start being analytical, because the whole reason you started doing comedy is probably because you loved comedy. So don't lose that.
Yes. So tell me about your lockdown experience then. So having done a few years as a comedian, and then suddenly comedy is closed for business.
Oh God, I know.
How did you fare?
I panicked. Well, everybody feels like they lost it because of they were on the cusp of greatness or whatever. I feel like everybody felt like that. And I had a gig supporting Frankie Boyle at the Soho Theatre for his like warm-up tour, basically. Yeah. And it was on I'm pretty sure it was like the 10th of March or something like that. Or maybe the 14th of March. I don't know. Anyway, it was around there. And I was just like, oh my God, here we go. This is me taking off, all this sort of stuff. And then, I think that was like my penultimate gig. And the other one was my first ever spot at the Bill Murray. And I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake, but everybody feels like that, because everybody feels like they were at their best point. because we kept, you keep working, you keep getting better gigs. So it's going to be like that whenever you do it.
Yeah.
So, it was, the weird thing was Ali Wood said this to me, and I know what he means. I wasn't as frustrated as I thought I was going to be. And I thought, this is weird because I've gigged every night. I've been working really hard about it and stuff like that. And Ali said, it's because nobody else is gigging either.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, you're totally right. Because if you were sort of, if you broke your leg or something and you couldn't gig for 2 months, I think I'd be going out of my mind, because I'd be like, all this opportunity that I can't take, all this stuff that I can't do, everything like that, you'd feel so frustrated. But the fact that there wasn't any gigs, and nobody was getting gigs that you could have done or would have done, it almost like I'm not going to say I wasn't bothered, because that's too flippant, but because everybody was in the same boat and it was such a seismic event, I just sort of coped with it, really. But then I did actually do a lot of Zoom gigs. And one of those, particularly for Dulwich Hamlet, which is the monthly night that I sort of co-run with Matt Arnold, who is the real showrunner. I just sort of get as people that I've gigged with that he likes. But we, because he's a TV producer, and a lot of the people at Dulwich Hamlet have one of them's a graphic designer, one of his friends was, does the title graphics for X Factor and stuff like that. They really like put on a show, and it was brilliant. And some Zoom gigs that you did were absolutely horrendous. But those ones were great. I mean, a few of them were really good, to be honest. It depended what the audience was like, if they were sort of regulars, if people were really into it, if they'd worked out how, to have like a front row, so to speak, so people that were unmuted. And we did all that first time, and I really remember thinking like, I don't know if we should do this, It's just, it's insane. Like it's going to be shit and all this sort of stuff. But it was a massive financial boost for the comedians, because all the ticket money went to them, like all the, and like some of the bigger acts even were like, oh, just, take my fee. It was like a really, really good energy. We had like title credits. It was almost like watching a TV show instead. But it was really good. In general, I was like, I didn't, I couldn't wait to get back to live comedy.
Yes,
but,
of course,
some of them you could kind of get through it, because it wasn't as bad as you thought. If people had put a bit of thought into it, that was the thing. Yeah.
As you saw, I saw some of those Dulwich Hamlet shows, and they're great. And for me, it was great because I would never go to those shows because it's too far away.
Exactly.
There's one thing that it did do is it opened up. And like you mentioned about American comedians, so I was able to watch American comedians. They're not going to fly to New York to see a show and then fly home. It did open up Australia, New Zealand. That's a nice one.
Definitely, yeah. No, there was definitely there was definitely some nice things to come out of it. I think. It's just that it doesn't compare to, of
course, no energy in the room.
Yeah.
Did you find that you were getting an international audience for Zoom gigs that you were on? Were you being seen from further afield?
Probably, yeah. Not massively that I knew of, but I think there were. I mean, in Dulwich we were getting like 400 people a gig, and we can only fit 120 in the actual clubhouse in real life. So I think there was people from, people that had friends and family abroad that always were using it also as like a social occasion, like to go and watch the gig together and then like have a Zoom after and have like a bit of a social time. It was mad, wasn't it? Like, absolutely. But just like to say like, oh, I've got a Zoom at 8:00 tonight, like a social Zoom. What the hell? Mad.
Well, talking of live shows then, so you took a 45-minute show to Edinburgh Fringe last year.
Yes.
Yeah. Coward's Hour. So, how was your festival experience? How is being at a festival and competing with 3,000 other people for attention?
It was, do you know what? It was surprisingly nice. I did a 12-night run, and I got pretty nice audiences. I'm very bad at flyering for myself. I can flyer for split bill stuff because it's not just me. I can fly for other people, but I'm too British in the sense that it's like it's just me, and I think I'm funny, like. And the show wasn't like the best. Like I it was more of a learning curve for me, I would say, than like taking a
Right.
amazing 45-minute. And I haven't really, a lot of people do that and then their hour show is sort of very similar.
Right.
But mine's not really. Because I don't know how people say the same, like even after 12 nights, I was like, gosh, I'm sick of saying this. And I'm going to have to do double that this year in Edinburgh. So that'll be fine. But, you know, with an hour, it's more of your sort of baby in a way. And you can change it as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did loads and loads of gigs as well as that. I was doing sort of like 3 gigs a day.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great and I thrive off the busyness, but I think I'm really going to have to discipline myself this year. I'm going to try and do the first 10 days like sort of fairly sober, and I'm staying with a friend of a friend who isn't a comedian who lives in Edinburgh, so I'm going to sort of have that as like my sanctuary, just so I don't go mad. And hopefully I can get some work while I'm up there as well, like remotely, like some my old job magazine work, I think just to keep my feet on the ground a little bit, and then the last 2 weeks, you know, fine, just
go mad,
basically. Yeah.
So let's talk about your new show then, your hour. You're debuting at Edinburgh with your debut hour.
Yes.
What's the show about? What can we expect?
It's called Not My Finest Hour, because because I'm going to try and not give too much away in a way, but
Sure.
It's about something. It's about doing things wrong. Essentially, it's about the culture of never admitting you're wrong, you know, publicly and on social media, and then it's also about something that I did that I'm not proud of, that I'm you know, quite ashamed. I'm ashamed of it, but I don't wish it didn't happen. And I think that's the weird juxtaposition that people face. Because I think you do learn from everything, and you are gonna fuck up. You are gonna do things wrong. And so whenever I was doing this thing, I used to say to my mates at the time, you know, oh, you know, genuinely, I used to be like, oh, I know it's not my finest hour, but blah 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 blah, and that, you know, try and justify it. And then I loved the title, and I thought it'd be quite a good concept for a show. And so it's sort of about, the more I'm sort of doing it, I mean, I changed the structure loads on Thursday. It's more about, your public persona, and the fact that, I mean, even it sort of touches briefly upon, you know, politicians never ever just saying, yeah, sorry that, you know, fucked up there, or famous people being like, yeah, I made a mistake, that was really bad, because it's always like, I did this, but actually it was because of this and this. It's like, yeah, there's always reasons why you do something wrong. And that is sort of what I'm doing in the show as well. I'm like, here's something that you're going to judge me for, and here's who I am, essentially. I'm sort of being a bit cryptic there, but it's hopefully funny, because I don't want to give away the sort of main topic of the show. But yeah, and it's about sort of kind of going through something, but it's not a serious show. I don't really have that like 40-minute mark where I don't really, I mean, I absolutely think that can be great, and I've loved shows like that, but I don't want to just force a point like that for nothing. There is a couple of moments in the show where you know, where it is sort of, there's a couple of serious lines, I think, that will maybe make people go away and think, but it's not a show that's like, and here's my poignant moment, you know, like, it's not that.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of show that I want to create. But I mean, I did it because I wanted to challenge myself. I don't think I'll ever take a show up again for the full month, just because it's so expensive. But I did really want to I think it's good to sort of have a goal to work towards, and to write an hour show. And I am finding it hard, you know, and it's not the sort of, I could write an hour show with a story and a structure and tell you a story that's but to make it like really funny when you're talking about quite a serious thing that happened to you is a challenge, but I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Well, we know it's a good show because it already got nominated as work in progress at Leicester for best debut.
Oh, that was such a nice show. I loved that show. It was great. I think that's the best preview I've had so far.
How do you feel about award nominations and competitions in general?
That's the only award I've ever got nominated for, so that's really nice. So I like Leicester the best. No, competitions I never really did, because I'm a storytelling comedian. And often in competitions, not competitions like that where it's your show, I'm talking about competitions when you're sort of coming up, you know, like new comedian of the year or whatever. Yeah. Often in the first few rounds, you get 5 minutes, and they're quite strict on it, as they should be, because, you know, you don't want somebody taking up way more time. But I always used to get so in my head about the timing because, mine aren't sort of little bits.
Right.
It's almost like if I start one, I sort of have to finish it.
Mm.
And I never did very well, ever. I got through like a couple of rounds of like Leicester Square a couple of times and Funny Women I did years ago, and got through that. But like, yeah, and then I just realized quite quickly that I didn't do very well in them. I wasn't very relaxed in them. I wasn't really myself in them. And I think they can be brilliant. Like really, if you suit them and you thrive in those scenarios, you can get seen by people really quickly.
Yeah.
But I just was never very good at them. So I sort of quite quickly was like, nah, I'm all right. Because I was getting gigs and enjoying myself and stuff. So I was like, and I always used to forget to enter them as well, which tells you that you're not really into it, I guess. But yeah, so now nice that I did first sort of show competition that I got a nomination was great, and it was a really nice show. I really enjoyed doing that one. Aside from that, I've not been a competition comedian at all.
What about like contests on the night, like gong shows and things like that?
I have done gong shows. Yeah, I've done. I did Beat the Frog a couple of times. I've done the Blackout a couple of times, and I've always got through. And I won Beat the Frog once. I think I've done 4. Yeah, I think I've done Beat the Frog twice and Up the Creek twice. And I basically my thing to myself was like, as long as you don't get gonged off, you've sort of won. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I've never got gonged off, and I actually won Beat the Frog once. So that's fine. That's fine for me. I feel like I've ticked them off. I've never done Beat the Frog because I would do it. Like now, I don't know if I would do it because I think it would kick you when you're trying to do an hour show. You'd feel a bit, even though it's a completely different thing. Right, but I used to always run Vauxhall on a Monday, so I never ever could do it, and that was quite a nice excuse. And now I'm like, I need to put myself through it, But I don't think gong shows are great. I think they're fun. I don't think, like, a lot of people I meet when I did the gong shows were doing like their first or second or third gig at the gong show. And I understand that in Manchester, it's almost kind of your easiest way of getting a big crowd quite early on. So I do understand why people do it. However, I do think like that could really knock your confidence just because of where you are in the lineup or what the crowd's like that night, or if someone, doesn't like the fact that you did a joke about XYZ. It can. I think if you've not got thick skin and you don't really understand how random a gong show can be, then to do it in your first 20 gigs, I would say is very brave. Like, and I hope it doesn't kind of put some people off. So, yeah.
So tell me then, assuming you're already given it, what have been your best and worst moments so far?
Oh, one of my best moments ever was hosting the Ealing Comedy Festival last year, and it was I was the MC, and it was Justin Morehouse, Neil Delamere, and Dylan Moran. Like my comedy hero. And I just couldn't, and it was great. And I also thought, like, I was MCing and it was in a big tent and stuff like that. And I thought, this is going to be tough as an MC, but it was great. And I came out and I said, hi, I'm Alexandra Haddow. I'm the only one on the bill tonight that none of you have a clue who I am. Right. And that was my opening line. And then I said, and then I started chatting to somebody in the audience on the front row. And I said, who have you come here to see tonight? And they said, you. I follow you on Twitter. So so straight away after I'd sort of put myself down, that happened. And then the crowd was they were just like absolutely great. And then, to bring Dylan on and have a gig with him. I mean, I only got it because it was the guy that runs Headliners in West London, Simon, who's lovely. And he was talking about this. He's talking about booking Dylan Moran, and he was like, "Oh, we've got Dylan." I was like, "Oh my god! I'm going to come down. I'm going to come and watch it." And he said, "Oh yeah, I filled the bill now." And I said, "No, I genuinely wasn't hinting for a slot or whatever." I said, I'll come and watch it." And then he called me up like a few days later, and he said, "Do you want to MC it?" And I was like, "Yes." So that was a great night. I was so buzzing after that. It felt like being a rock star, like a festival. I think that was my that was one that certainly like springs to mind. I mean, hosting Reading Festival was amazing, but the atmosphere, that was tough. You know, it's a massive tent. People aren't really listening, or there's hardly anyone in there.
Yeah.
That's a really tough gig. It's a sort of prestigious gig, but it's tough. Whereas this was like a massive, amazing gig, but actually the crowd were really going for it, and it's great. Yeah. Worst moments. I mean, I think possibly one of my previews recently was on a Sunday night. Was on a Sunday night at 2-0 down, and like 6 people were there, and I think it's a quite tough room. I think 2-0 down, especially if there's not many people in it. And it was like my second time. I tell you when it was. It was the day after the Leicester preview, and they could not have been more different. That's the weird thing about comedy. You know, I was flying high from doing the Leicester show, and I'd loved it. It was great. It was so easy. The crowd were great, and I was really relaxed. And then the next night, I just sort of, I guess, went into it with maybe like a bit of arrogance, because I was like, oh, this is, you know, it's going really well. And then comedy has its own way of taking you down and being like, actually, you're at square one. And I mean, that's definitely not the worst moment of my, you know, comedy career. There's been obviously awful gigs when you start out and stuff like that. But that was one where I was like, oh, kind of good in a way, because you go home, you're like, I've really got to work on this, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But it's like at any moment you can be brought down to earth, I think, is the thing with comedy.
How different do you think that your Edinburgh show will be from that work in progress at Leicester, and indeed how different will it be from the beginning of your Edinburgh run to the end? Do you constantly make big changes?
At the moment I'm changing it a lot, not necessarily the sort of general theme and arc and message of the show is still the same, but I've completely changed the structure around. And it's almost like at an editing stage in a way. Yeah. Because if I want to tell you everything, it's like everything I've ever done in my life. I've always overwritten, you know, word counts over whenever I'm writing for somewhere, because you're like, oh, you need to know this, this, and this. And it's whenever you start a joke, actually, whenever you do a joke for the first time, I'm always like, here's all the context and here's the joke. And then by the time it's brilliant and it's in your club set, it's like a 2-line joke. Yeah. You know, because you realise that people don't need all that, but it's almost like you can't see the wood for the trees when you first write a joke, because you think that people need to know everything you know. Yes. Yeah. So it's almost like trimming the fat is essentially what it's going to be. Yeah. And so it'll be recognisable as the same show, definitely, but it's the nuances will be different, and the order will be different, and the structure will be different. Yeah. Yeah.
So what are the most important lessons that you've learned so far? What philosophies do you take forward with you?
Oh, never act like you're too good for a gig. That is my pet hate. Even if you're a massive, you know, the comedians that I admire the most are, you know, big names that I've sometimes booked for gigs that I've put on, you know, because I've gigged them at a big gig or something. And then it's, you know, it's something you're trying out. It's a new gig or whatever. And maybe there's not a lot of people there. Maybe the room isn't quite right yet. Stuff like that. And the comedians that I think will always do best are the ones that are understanding of, I mean, because, you know, you're paying them anyway, right? So like, if it's something like that, they're getting a set fee anyway. And the comedians that do best are always the ones I think that just like, they take that in their stride and they either turn it round, or they, if it's, you know, unplayable or whatever. Not that sounds like I've run loads of unplayable gigs, I don't. But you know, there's been times where people have approached, like, you know, me and Jamie to run a gig, and we're like, okay, you know, have you got this sorted? You got yeah. And then, you know, it doesn't, you know, they haven't really thought it through, or they haven't sorted the sound out properly, or like there's not as many people there because they haven't promoted it. Yeah. And you know, people like Tom Ward, you know, I've booked for stuff like that, and he just turns up and he'll just smash it. He'll just do the gig. Yeah. And you know, David Mills. Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Another one who's one of my absolute favourites, and we booked him for this private members club, and again, it wasn't we couldn't promote it because it was only for private members, and it was the last one we ever did there, and it was just you know, they hadn't told anyone about it and stuff like that, and we were like, David, I'm so sorry, and the staff were really rude, and he just went up there and he just destroyed the place, the staff, the room. he was just absolutely incredible. And he just always is like, hey, look, you gave me a gig, it's fine. Like, he's just amazing. I think he deserves everything. But I think that is definitely a lesson. You know, there's people that then would turn up and sort of be like, oh, yeah, and constantly mention how bad the gig is or whatever. And he's just saying, yeah, I know that as well.
Yeah.
And so I've never done that to other people either, when they've, you know, you can in your head be like, oh God, this is awful. But you don't really blame the person, because usually they've been asked to do a gig for this venue or this company or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think definitely that. My very niche pet hate is and the lesson that I always think is, especially because I MC a lot, people who, when you're bringing them onto the stage, even when you've started saying their name, they're still stood at the back. It's like, come on, there's a momentum. Like, you know, you'll say like, please welcome, you know, John Smith or whatever, and then they'll be, and then people start clapping, and then they start walking on. You're like, but now they're clapping for a long time.
Yeah.
And then you've got to get on the stage. I've got to get off. Like, be ready. Like, yeah, that is my that's my niche lesson.
I've seen too many times that the applause sort of runs out, and then there's a quiet walk to the from the edge of the stage to the microphone.
Why are you doing that? You've been waiting at the back the whole gig, and the MC's sort of there, like, come on, you know. Oh yeah, I don't get it. Yeah, just, I don't know, work hard and be nice to people. It's cliche, but it's true, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also, you know, just never. Like I say, you can have the best gig in the world one night, do the same show the next night, and it's going to be the worst thing you've ever done. So just always prepare to be humbled.
So what about objectives? Do you set yourself targets? Do you have objectives for what you want to achieve with your show at Edinburgh? Or do you have like a 5-year plan, what you want to do, what you want to achieve?
No, I don't really. I just want to do everything. I want to try everything. I want to write stuff. I've got an idea for a book and for a sitcom that I don't know if even it is a sitcom really, but yeah, sort of. That sort of stuff. I just need, like, you know, a 26-hour day would be great, and no need to sleep. No, I just really, my only objective at the moment is to do honestly the best Edinburgh show that I can, and something to be proud of. Essentially, is what. Yeah. And to gig with Dylan Moran again. But no, yeah, just honestly to do that. I'd love to do the news quiz as well. But these aren't. I haven't like written these down, but these are sort of what I would love to do. Yeah, and to write for TV shows and stuff. I did some jokes for Ivo Graham for Have I Got News for You, and it was so much fun. It's great.
Are you sitting there waiting for your joke? You go, that's mine. That's one of mine.
Genuinely, that's what I did. Yeah, and one of them made the cut. So. There we go.
How can we find out about you? How can we find out where you're gigging, where you're next going to be playing?
Oh, yeah. If you go, I've got a link tree, and it's all on all my socials. So if you follow me at Alexandra Haddow on Instagram, or at Miss A Haddow on Twitter, purely because Alexandra Haddow was taken on Twitter by someone that doesn't even use it. So yeah, Miss A Haddow on Twitter. Yeah. And you can find, there's link trees on there with like my gigs coming up and stuff. So please come to a show. Yeah.
So finally, can you sum up for me, what is to you comedy in a nutshell?
Comedy in a nutshell is the best job in the world, because you're getting paid to make people laugh. That is, honestly, I will never ever complain about it to a serious degree, because it is the best. It is like giving people the best feeling in the world, like some light relief. And yeah, it's like winning a race. Honestly, it's the best feeling ever. So that was comedy to me in a nutshell.
Alex, thanks so much. It's been fantastic.
Oh, thank you for having me, Mark. Cheers. Thanks a lot.